Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
I mean, if you need proof that Capitol Hill operates at an almost unsustainable pace, you just had to look at this last week.
Oh, absolutely.
It was the single day where you had three massive, completely separate political battles all converging at once. We're talking high-stakes legal fights, policy deadlines, just screaming toward a cliff.
And these internal party feuds that got so fierce, they actually needed a former president to step in and mediate.
Yeah.
It wasn't just busy. It was like a masterclass in political leverage.
Leverage, that's the perfect word for it.
Yeah, every single major player, from Speaker Johnson all the way to former special counsel Jack Smith, was trying to force everyone else into a corner. So our mission in this deep dive is to synthesize all these really complex sources.
Right.
We want to unpack the strategies, understand the urgency of these expiring policies, and really see why these fights are defining this legislative moment. It's a shortcut to understand the power dynamics that are reshaping Congress right now.
Okay, so let's start where things were maybe the most heated. The escalating legal and oversight battle over Jack Smith.
Yeah.
So on December 3rd, House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan issues a formal subpoena. He's demanding a closed-door deposition from Smith later this month, and he wants documents even sooner than that. This is a huge step up.
It is, and what's absolutely fascinating here is this whole conflict over transparency versus control. Because Smith's lawyer, Peter Koski, he immediately points out that Smith had already offered to appear voluntarily.
Right, I remember that.
Nearly 6 weeks ago, and he offered to do it in an open hearing. But the committee insisted on this private session, and Koski said the public was being, and I'm quoting here, denied the opportunity to hear directly from Jack on these topics.
So why? Why refuse a public hearing? If your goal, as Republicans are saying, is to expose the, quote, weaponization of the DOJ, wouldn't you want the whole world to be watching?
Well, that's the procedural genius of the move, if you want to call it that. It all comes down to control and to creating a very specific kind of formal record. Okay, see, Republicans, especially Jordan, they're laser focused on investigating how Smith handled the Trump cases, the classified documents, the 2020 election stuff. In a public hearing, every member gets what, 5 minutes?
Just enough for a soundbite.
Exactly. It's great for TV, but it's terrible for building a comprehensive record. It just becomes a spectacle.
Rather than a real investigation.
Precisely. But in a closed-door deposition, each side, each party, gets a full hour to question the witness. That lets them methodically pressure Smith, lock him into specific testimony, and get these little details that they can then leak or release whenever it's most strategic for them.
It's all about controlling the narrative.
100%. Which is why the ranking Democrat, Jamie Raskin, he just blasted the move. He basically said Republicans only want it to be private so they can spin, distort, and cherry-pick everything Smith says.
And this whole conflict, it feels really personal, especially given the history between Jim Jordan and the Justice Department.
It does. And Raskin, he made a point to contrast what the DOJ did to get Jordan's data versus what Smith was asking for.
Right.
He brought up the fact that the Justice Department had previously subpoenaed years of Jordan's personal phone data, which Raskin himself called manifestly overbroad. Then he compared that to Smith's requests, which he said were, narrowly tailored to just the days around January 6th.
Yeah.
It just shows you the deep-seated tension behind every single move the committee is making right now.
That tension is a perfect setup for our next big headline, which it also centers on this idea of political weaponization, but it crosses party lines in just the most shocking way. We have to talk about President Trump's surprise pardon of Representative Henry Cuellar.
Yeah.
The conservative Texas Democrat who was indicted back in 2024 on bribery charges. This was just pure political jujitsu. I mean, Trump issues the pardon, wipes away all of Cuellar's legal problems, and then he frames it as a response to the weaponization of the DOJ against Cuellar. He even tied it specifically to the congressman criticizing the Biden administration's border policies. So for Trump, the goal was to show his opposition to the DOJ isn't just about him.
Exactly, that it crosses party lines.
It's the ultimate political gift. But the immediate fallout for the Republican Party seems entirely negative, doesn't it?
Oh, it's devastatingly so. I mean, Cuellar was facing a fight that could have ended his career. Suddenly, he's free.
And what did he do?
10 hours after the pardon, he files for re-election.
Yeah.
As a Democrat. He publicly thanked Trump, but then he immediately got on the phone with senior Democrats and assured them he had absolutely zero intention of switching parties. He called himself a good old conservative Democrat.
And the GOP has spent years and a lot of money trying to flip Cuellar's seat in the Rio Grande Valley.
Years. This completely derails years of strategy. The day before the pardon, a top Republican recruit had just jumped into the race to challenge him. Now, that's all out the window. Cuellar's running again. He's a known entity, and his legal baggage is just gone. And while, a veteran Republican like Pete Sessions pointed out that Taylor staying a Democrat proves there was not a quid pro quo, the tactical reality is that Trump just saved a sitting Democrat. And he made one of the GOP's top target seats way, way harder to flip.
Okay, from legal moves and pardons, let's pivot to a policy crisis with a deadline that you just cannot move. The massive healthcare scramble. We're talking about the Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies, the ACA subsidies, which are set to drop dramatically at the end of the year.
Yeah, and this is a classic policy example.
Yeah.
If Congress does nothing, 24 million Americans are going to see their health insurance premium spike noticeably and in just a few weeks. So the pressure to act is very real, which is why the political strategy is so intense.
So Democrats have a plan to force the issue, and it involves a legislative tool that a lot of people might not know about, the discharge petition.
That's right. Senate Democrats, led by Schumer, they're using a deal they already struck with Republicans, the one that ended the government shutdown, to propose a clean, simple 3-year extension of the subsidies. And the timing is key. It's meant to align perfectly with the House discharge petition.
And for anyone who doesn't know, a discharge petition is a way for a majority of House members, 218 of them, to
force a vote.
Right, to force a vote on a bill, and it completely bypasses the committee and the speaker.
It's a massive political threat to Speaker Johnson. It forces his most vulnerable members to go on the record and vote on a really popular policy.
So it's designed to pressure the Republicans.
It is, but the Senate proposal itself is, as Senator Thien put it, designed to fail. Because a clean extension needs 60 votes in the Senate to get past a filibuster, and Republicans are just dug in. They want compromises, income caps, restrictions on abortion funding, things like that.
Okay, so if a clean extension is dead on arrival, what are the serious Republican alternatives? Because they can't just say no and let premiums spike right before an election.
Right. And this is where you start to see the different philosophical approaches emerge. One of the biggest ideas is from Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He points out that even with the subsidies, a lot of people are basically underinsured because of these massive deductibles.
Sometimes thousands of dollars.
Up to $6,000, especially on those less comprehensive plans.
The bronze tier plans, right?
Correct, the bronze tier plans. Lowest premiums, but the highest out-of-pocket costs. So Cassidy's idea is to take that enhanced subsidy money and instead of paying premiums, convert it into a government-funded health savings account, an HSA, for people on those bronze plans.
So the money goes directly to the deductibles.
Exactly. He argues it shifts the focus from just having coverage to actual real-world affordability.
And how did that idea land with Democrats?
Well, Senator Bernie Sanders, he bristles immediately. He said that approach just won't guarantee health insurance to all people. And that really shows you the core ideological split, Republicans want consumers to manage pre-tax savings, and Democrats want government guarantees for coverage.
Then you have Senator Josh Hawley, who comes in with this huge tax deduction idea.
Yeah, Hawley's pitch is it's very ambitious. His bill would let all taxpayers deduct up to $25,000 per person in medical expenses. That includes their premiums. And it wouldn't matter if they itemize their taxes or not.
Wow, that's a big proposal.
A huge one. And he apparently discussed it directly with former President Trump, who was, according to the sources, intrigued by this idea of no taxes on health care.
That's a powerful message. It kind of sidesteps the whole ACA framework.
It does, and it really underlines the strategic advice the GOP leadership is getting right now. Because Trump's top pollster, Tony Fabrizio, he was briefing the Republican Study Committee, and Speaker Johnson was in that meeting.
And what was the advice?
The advice was to pivot away from extending the current subsidies. Fabrizio didn't recommend an extension at all. Instead, he said they should focus all their messaging on reducing drug prices and align that with what Trump has talked about before. That's the playbook. Don't compromise on subsidies, just attack drug costs.
Shifting gears a little. All of this pressure, the discharge petitions, the deadlines, the policy fights, it all lands right on Speaker Johnson's desk. And he's already dealing with some pretty serious internal headaches.
He is walking on a razor's edge. I mean, he just survived a special election in Tennessee. They held on to a safe red seat, but the margin was in the single digits.
In a district, Trump won by 22 points.
Exactly. That's a huge warning sign.
Yeah.
But his biggest headache recently was a very public, very aggressive fight with a key member of his own leadership team, Elise Stefanik.
And this was about the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. This is the must-pass bill for defense spending every year.
Right, and Stefanik accused Johnson of blocking a provision that was really important to her. It would require Congress to be notified anytime the FBI opens a counterintelligence investigation into a presidential candidate or another federal candidate.
And she didn't just disagree with him, she went public with it.
Oh, she went public in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
She basically accused him of being ineffective, of misleading her. It was a direct challenge to his authority as Speaker.
So Johnson is trying to navigate all this, and he has to take time out to deal with this fight.
He did. And the resolution came from the highest possible level. President Trump got on a phone call with both Johnson and Stefanik and mediated the whole thing.
And what was the result?
Stefanik declared victory. She announced the provision will be included in the bill. So she won, but it puts Johnson in a really tough spot because adding that controversial language that could cost him the Democratic support, he absolutely needs to pass the NDAA.
And because the NDAA is a must-pass bill, it becomes this train that everyone tries to attach their own legislation to, which brings us back to affordability, but this time, housing.
Absolutely. The White House and Senate leaders like Scott and Warren, they are pushing very hard to attach the road to housing package to the NDAA. They see it as the one guaranteed vehicle to get it passed.
But again, House leadership is pushing back.
Correct. The House Financial Services Chair, French Hill, he immediately pumped the brakes, said his committee hadn't seen the latest text, they didn't have buy-in.
And that delay is a big deal because housing affordability is a massive issue for people right now.
It's one of the biggest economic stressors, which is why that same pollster, Fabrizio, advised the Republican Study Committee to focus their message on advancing something called portable mortgages.
Okay, let's define that because it's a really interesting concept. What is a portable mortgage?
So it's a mechanism that would let you, the homeowner, when you move, take your existing low-interest mortgage rate with you to the new property.
So if you got a 3% rate a few years ago, you could keep it.
Exactly. Even if the market rate is now 7%. Being able to port that 3% rate over is a huge boost for affordability. It could unlock a housing market that's basically been paralyzed. That's the strategic message the GOP is being told to hammer home.
Okay, finally, let's touch quickly on the broader oversight front. There are some new materials in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation.
Yeah, the House Oversight Committee has received some pretty significant stuff recently. We're talking financial documents from JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank, which they say they're going to release publicly soon. And they also got a whole trove of photos and videos from authorities in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
And we've already seen some specific, powerful images from that compound get out.
We have. Among the photos that were publicly posted, there was one really striking one. It was a framed photograph found inside the compound that showed Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with Pope John Paul II.
Wow.
Yeah. And that detail, it just brings the whole dark context of this investigation into really sharp focus, right as all the financial details are about to drop.
Before we sum all this up, let's just note one last dynamic that's really compounding all of Speaker Johnson's challenges.
Which is?
The constant drain of expertise from his team.
Yes. He just lost a key senior policy advisor, Chris Gerarda. This is a person who covered privacy, tech, intelligence, really high-stakes areas. He left to join Holland and Knight's lobbying practice.
And that's part of a bigger trend.
It is. A lot of high-level GOP leadership staff are moving downtown. And that transfer of knowledge is critical. I mean, Gerarda's insights on how to navigate this tiny majority, that's exactly what lobbying clients will pay for. And it just depletes Johnson's ability to manage all this chaos.
So if we pull back and look at this whole intense landscape, you've got the DOJ and Congress in this high-stakes legal fight over Jack Smith.
At the same time, the policy clock is ticking down to zero on the ACA subsidies, which threatens millions of household budgets.
And internally, the GOP leadership is fighting over basic bills like the NDAA and housing policy, needing the former president to come in and play mediator.
The common thread, like we said at the top, is leverage. Every single action is designed to maximize it. Jordan uses the closed door for investigative leverage. Democrats use the discharge petition for legislative leverage. Trump uses the pardon for political leverage.
And it's all happening under the shadow of these real-world crises that Congress has to address.
They just have to.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We kept seeing this theme of public versus private action today. Jack Smith asked for a public hearing, but gets subpoenaed for a closed-door session. Healthcare and housing strategies are being hashed out in these private meetings with pollsters. So the question is, what is truly gained by the public and what is inevitably lost when these critical political decisions and high-stakes testimonies are forced to happen behind closed doors rather than out in the open.
It's a crucial question to think about as these negotiations continue, mostly out of sight.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.